Hello Year 13. As promised, this is the third and final part of the Churchill Revision. Now, I know and I gather from various sources that you're also getting work set by the other teacher if you're with Mr. Nation. He's doing an excellent job of starting the British political history section from 1951 through to 1997. So I shan't step on his toes. And I will take that under advisement from that set that you may be a little bit slower on getting through the work, and that's perfectly fine. This is designed to support you. It's not designed to stress you out. This is the last video input that I'll be giving on this particular booklet. After that, we'll have a Teams lesson that I'll arrange with each set independently, and we'll discuss how to do a practice question on Churchill. Those of you that already handed in the practice question on 1066, which should be everyone now, I think. I've marked, as soon as I've got them in, all of the others, and we'll move on to do Churchill. The vast majority of you got the idea of how to use sources, and as predicted, the main issue was context. But of course it is. It's not a course you've done. So, today, I'm going to take you through the last bit of the booklet, explain the different sections with new recording software to see if I can make it work a little bit more effectively. Oh, look at that! I've got to zoom in. I don't know whether I'll be able to move that terribly easily, however, but we'll see how we go. So, on the right-hand side there, you've got the recall grid that we haven't started yet on key issue 3, on international diplomacy 1939 to 1945, and it's entitled Britain, Empire and the World. And there are, as usual, 6 boxes. You don't have to write words. No one suggested this had to be done in words and contiguous sentences. If you prefer to do diagrams, pictures, cartoon strips, illustrations, that's fine. This is supposed to augment your notes, not to replace them. So it's kind of like the first stop you'll have in your revision, and then you check your notes for the detail. That's as it should be. So please don't try and cram everything in here. That won't be helpful to anyone. Use it as like an index or a contents guide to the rest of your work. So, what was Churchill's view on Britain's imperial role during and after the war? Now, the principal illustration you have of this in your notes is on India and how he saw Britain's role in dealing with India. Furthermore, we've hinted with the Mediterranean strategy that Churchill has particular views on the empire because of the fact that Egypt was only important insofar as it had the Suez Canal in it. Otherwise, not an issue. Also, keep in mind, in 1940, how Churchill dealt with, for want of a better phrase, Norway and trammelled over what it wanted. So, you've got an idea about how Churchill saw Britain's imperial role. This was changed, of course, during the 1941 agreement with the United States, the Atlantic Charter, which, again, you'll have to look up. And, of course, after the war, we had decolonisation, though Churchill was famously reluctant to offer African nations independence. And, of course, well, yes, we know how India went. Was it realistic that Churchill felt that Britain could be the defender of the world's honour and maintain an empire that may last for 1,000 years? Men will still say this was their finest hour. And given the situation at the end of the First World War with bankruptcy and what had happened in the 1930s with the Depression, and the fact that India was quite clearly going to become independent sooner or later. What was Churchill's view on Britain's world role? So outside of our empire, how should we be viewed, and where did we fit in international diplomacy according to Churchill? And you'll remember that we did some lessons on this, and Churchill had a number of aims he was attempting to achieve diplomatically. My argument then, and is now, that he failed to achieve those aims. Was it realistic to assume that Britain would remain a world player in a world that would become dominated by nuclear weapons? What were Churchill's aims for Britain post-war? There were those 3. Did he achieve them? That's that box. As you can see, there's going to be a lot of crossover. There's going to be a lot of like Venn diagram overlap. You don't have to put an incredible amount of detail here. That's not the point. It was never the point. It's all about signposting your notes. I think we did about 2 lessons, maybe 3, on that particular section. Then we've got the Grand Alliance, which overlapped with what we just talked about in the lessons themselves, and this tries to separate them out so you can use them in an exam. What was the Grand Alliance? That's easier than you think. It's just the countries that are involved and what it was aiming to do. Why did Churchill believe it was needed? Now, bear in mind, the Grand Alliance that we're talking about initially is in the 1930s. It's not the one that comes into being in the 1940s. Keep that in mind, because there is one significant difference between the Grand Alliance proposed by Churchill in the 1930s and the Grand Alliance as it came into being in the 1940s. I won't hint, but I'll just say, male voice choirs, and no, I'm not talking about Wales. Why did Churchill believe it was needed? That whole thing with the 30s. Gee, I wonder why you think that might be. Why was Chamberlain opposed to it? Because he kind of was. And this is in a practice question you already have. So dig through your notes. You'll find a letter from Chamberlain to his sister about a Grand Alliance. And in it, he lists the reasons that he doesn't like it. That's it. That's all we're asking for. Why is Churchill often created with the success of the Grand Alliance? Well, again, look at those early lectures we did on Churchill's relationship with people like Roosevelt and Churchill's belief in a victory in the USSR. Now, I asked you to find that article about Churchill's political leadership in the Second World War. There is a section in there on the surprising nature of relationship with Moscow. And that might help explain this box here too. You will note a lot of the same context gets used in different ways depending on the topic. You don't need to know much, but what you do know you need to be able to use in multiple places. Why could Churchill not be credited with its success? Okay, the opposing argument. We just said why could he be credited? And then we're saying, okay, and why could he not be? Why would it have happened anyway? Why was he pushing on open doors? Why was it something that kind of would have happened and all he had to do was acquiesce and let it happen, if you see what I mean? The counter-argument. Yes, I am asking you to be a bit schizophrenic. Yes, I just said one way and now you're going to do the other way. That's history. You don't have to agree with either of these points, by the way. It's somewhere in between. Why could Churchill's role in the Grand Alliance be seen as a sacrifice? That's an interesting one. In this case, a sacrifice of what? To whom? I'll give you a clue. Those three aims included something about the British Empire, and I argue he did not achieve it. The final grid, and again, I'm not going through the facts, I'm just telling you where to find them. That's the whole point in these videos. The final view is Churchill's contribution to international... Is it the final one? Yeah. Churchill's contribution... Oh my goodness, I've broken it. There we go. Churchill's contribution to international conferences and plans for dealing with post-war Europe. And for this, we're talking about the big three conferences. So what happened at Potsdam and Yalta? Two of the big three. The other one's Tehran. So note the missing of Tehran. What were Stalin's post-war aims? Again, we discussed these. If you don't know them, look them up. They're easily findable on Wikipedia, and for once that's actually reasonably accurate in its descriptions. Just be careful with the analysis. It is written mainly by Americans. What were Roosevelt's post-war aims? Again, we discussed these. In lesson, you have them in your lecture notes, but if you can't find them for whatever reason, then feel free, look it up online. And again, be careful. It's an American president. These things, but it's fine. We don't need too much detail. We just need to know what they are. What were Churchill's post-war aims for Europe? What did he want? And again, we kind of covered this, but note that for Europe, it's very specific. Again, with Brexit, it kind of ruins the online aspect of things because people assign to Churchill all manner of opinions that he never actually had in real life. So in this one, exercise some caution. We did cover it briefly in lessons, but it was brief, and I'll admit that. You don't need to know too much. Suffice to say, he's more warm to the idea of Europe creating their own union to prevent war than he is of Britain being part of that union. So he likes the idea of the EU, but thought that Britain should keep out of it in order to be a policeman of it. He would not have been against the idea of Britain joining it, but it shouldn't be there at the ground. We set the standard. Other people lived up to Britishness. So in essence, the European Union, as he saw it, was an extension of British values across continental Europe that Britain could join or not join because it would be the same as Britain. It would never harm Britain. It could only be Britain, which is why you're going to find it difficult online finding his views on things, because both Ramonas and Brexiteers find him to support their point of view. 2016. Anyway, who was most successful at the end of the war in achieving their aims? And that's an opinion question. Don't worry, you can't get that wrong. All you need to know is look at the aims and how far you think each of them were achieved. If you don't want to give an opinion, you say, well, I don't know really, I just want to know whether they achieved their aims or not. That's fine, and you can weigh it up in the moment or come up with something ridiculous in an exam. So look at their aims, look at what actually happened, what were the outcomes of Yalta, Tehran and Potsdam, and that should give you an idea about who achieved their aims the most. It doesn't matter about what Wikipedia says or the internet says, just look at the aims and whether or not they were achieved. It's as simple as that. You don't have to go further than that. There's no moral judgment here. So it doesn't matter if you find that it's a distasteful answer. Why could it be viewed that Churchill was successful? Now, remember, the course has changed, and under the new headings of the course, they're very keen on Churchill's successes, and they're very keen indeed that Churchill did a good job with what he was given. And there is a convincing argument to be made that Churchill played his hand, which was particularly bad, as well as he could. You know I don't necessarily agree with that point of view, but that's the joy of history. Your notes should contain enough information to provide evidence that he was successful in his international diplomacy and in working with the various big cheeses that he worked with. And principal among this will be the percentages agreement. I'm just going to leave that hanging. So, with any luck, that's enough of a hint, if you will, to go through your notes, know where to look, and know how to improve on what you have in your notes, or where to point to in your notes to find the information. The idea is not to put you under stress. If this takes longer than necessary, longer than you'd expect rather, not than necessary, because you've got other work set by other teachers, so be it. That's just there to support you. It's not there to be done immediately. So those of you who've got Mystical Nations lessons now, do those as well. This takes only one lesson a week rather than two. And for those of you that I share with Miss Wibberley, I will pass on Mr. Nation's lessons in chronological order when they occur. These are designed to support and help. There will be a Teams lesson following this one, and I'll arrange it. I think for my set, that'll be next Monday. That's the one I share with Mr. Nation, I think. And for the set I share with Miss Wibberley, I'll do that this coming Friday, and in that I shall launch the practice question that we'll be doing on Churchill. So the next lessons, Friday and Monday, yeah, that works, we'll be doing that, basically. So the set I share with Mr. Nation, you'll get another week from this lesson. Before we launch that question, you've got work from Mr. Nation, and the set I share with Miss Wibberley, I will see you this Friday and we'll launch it, because of course there are no lessons set by Mr. Nation, and I can just plug in the next lesson along in chronological order. Obviously with the practice question, you can choose to do it in timed conditions, or you can choose to see it as a practice and go through all your notes, whichever you're most prepared for. It doesn't really matter. You set your own challenge on this. The great joy of remote learning means that you can do that and you're not constrained by a school timetable in that way. So if you want to do it in time conditions, I warmly encourage you to do so. It would take half an hour, I believe, to complete that. Or 45 minutes. It's an hour and a half. I think it's an hour and a half. 45 minutes to complete that. And 45 minutes for an essay with extra time, I think 15 minutes for reading the sources. So if you want to do it in timed conditions, after we've talked it through, that's the extra 15 minutes. 45 minutes of writing an essay, please feel free. And if you don't go through your notes. Make it absolutely forensic. Cross every T, dot every I. We will do a timed piece. I will force you to do it at some point, but you don't have to do it straight away. So you know it's coming. I've rambled enough about that. That will be the 2019 paper, so don't worry, you can't accidentally find it online. Please go pillage as many resources as you can find online to prepare for examinations and to prepare questions. There is nothing wrong with doing any of those. You are not putting yourself at a disadvantage. The mocks, if we have them will be on the November 2020 paper that I don't think anyone in this school took, but I know exist, so we'll use those. It seems daft not to use those for a mock, which allows me to use the 2019 paper, which is not yet released by the exam board publicly, as a sort of practice paper that you won't have seen. It'll be an unseen paper. So please don't worry. You cannot undermine anything we're doing by putting in extra effort yourselves, and even if you don't want to, this will hopefully support you as much as you need as well. And with that, I say thank you very much. Have a lovely rest of day year 13. I hope things are going well. Please put things in the comments if you're experiencing any trouble at all. And please don't worry too much about the marks that are coming out on the 1066 paper. It was all about technique and getting you used to using sources again. It's not a course you've studied for 2 years. You haven't studied 1066 since year 7. The interesting thing is how well you can do on year 7 knowledge, showing you just how much you actually need the context in Churchill. The answer is not a lot, but what you do need is enough to use the provenance. And you should be better at that because you'll know who the characters are in a way that you didn't when we did the 1066 thing. So, have a lovely day. I will see you in the next video, or rather I won't. I'll see you in a live Teams lesson on our next timetable point to meet. So, thank you very much, and I'll see you then.